Welcome once again to The Lost Signals Discusses Games and Gaming Culture, a pretentious, philosophical, pedantic podcast where we focus on various aspects of video games as well as other issues and topics within gaming in general. Hello there, welcome back to The Lost Signals Discusses Games and Gaming Culture, and I have never had the high score, but I am Scott Thurlow, here with my fellow historians, Jonathan Ian Manzer.
It's like golf. You go for the lowest score possible.
I mean, that's how I played every game. And of course, Stephen Amosi.
I was going to say, I'm the one that attains the lowest score, so you guys are safe from that.
Indeed. And we're going to be discussing a series, a 6-part episode series on Netflix called High Score, which sort of does like a very broad kind of overview of the history of games from the earliest days, like Atari days, even before that, like arcade stuff, up to roughly like the early 90s when early online games and so forth. So that's sort of the broad overview, and it has interviews and like little tidbits and tales from people who were there, like developers, game designers, artists, and so forth. And that's pretty much it. So just going to kind of discuss it, not reviewing it or anything, but talk about the neat bits. And I think he's going to sort of provide a more specific breakdown of each episode and what they focus on.
All right. So there's 6 episodes in the series. One of the issues I had with this is that a lot of the episodes felt scattershot.
A little haphazard.
So even with me explaining what the episodes are about, I'm not necessarily telling you all of the stories that they're including in it. It's loosely structured by era, but not always. Anyway, so going on. The first episode's Boom and Bust. It's about the early rise arcade, following along with people who were intricate in development of the arcade and advancements in there, but also the development of Atari and consoles. Second one, and it ends the episode with the death of Atari and the famous E.T. game. Then development of Nintendo from a card company to a worldwide phenomena, going into things like Donkey Kong and Mario, stuff like that. Third kind of diverts from the narrative of the development of video games to go into role-playing games and the influence of how role-playing games develop from like D&D and other tabletops to video games, things like Ultima series, things like that. Then we go into how Sega, This Is War, which is Sega and Sega's influence on the console wars, and also football and Madden and things like that. I was actually playing Ratchet & Clank quite a bit through that, so my diversion. No. The next one's Fight, which is dealing with development of Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, and also the big controversy
in games
back in the day, which was, I remember growing up with that. It's funny how games have only become more violent, and that controversy is the controversy has kind of died down now. And then the final one is Level Up, which is discussing the advent of 3D graphics, games like Doom and Star Fox. And actually, I think that was the most structured of all of the ones. But anyway, that's basically the overview of the series.
Yeah, so they're about like 40 minutes, maybe a little give or take each.
I think they're all between 40 and 50 minutes. I'm actually looking at it right now. So the last one is only 37 minutes, but the rest of them are between 40 and 50.
Yeah, so it's like bingeable enough, I guess I want to say, and of course, like priding myself on a game nerd and like liking the history and the ins and outs of it and like industry trends and what happened. Like, I think it does provide a very nice, accessible insight to it, but also some stuff that like even I didn't know. So like I want to admit my ignorance for a few things. Apparently, Steve-O did know this one, but one of the things was Donkey Kong got sued. The game, like they sued Nintendo. Universal Studios sued them over it because, of course, of King Kong. And Nintendo hired an American lawyer named Jack Kirby, who apparently is like did a shit ton of research and like put together this amazing case to prove that like in Japan at least, this is like a sub fact. There's like Kong car wash. Like Kong just became synonymous for big giant like ape monkey thing. Like that, a lot of other companies that have nothing to do with games like called itself that.
Linguistically, it's called generification, and that's when a product becomes so well known that it becomes the representation of
Yeah,
it all.
and surpasses
And
the
yeah.
original. Right.
So, for instance, a very modern example of that is, regardless of what search engine you are, you're likely Googling something.
Yes, exactly. So similar to that, and like he basically built the case to prove that, like in the instance of Donkey Kong being sued. So they won the case, and Kirby the character is in fact named after a portly bald man who was named Jack Kirby.
It was very pinkish as well.
Yeah. So like, and he was like dryly funny about it. He was like, they didn't technically. I'm a lawyer, and they didn't ask me for use, so like. So like that was really funny. Another thing is, I think in the first one as well, where once arcades were like blown up at the time, and then a bunch of like 4 or 5 MIT students, obviously, who dropped out and formed their own company, were basically like fucking modding the arcade things, like setting up fucking rooms in their dorms and like charging people for them, whatever. And like they're the ones who actually, I personally like Miss Pac-Man the game like quite a bit. I played a lot. Local bar by us, number of them used to have it, and we played a shitload of it. It essentially is a mod. It's not officially made, or wasn't at least. Like they modded it and like sort of not skirted, but like they were able to work out a deal/contract to be able to work with actual Midway or whoever made Pac-Man. I forget, but yeah.
I think it was Atari, or was it Atari?
I don't remember. I should know that too. Like, sorry, as I get older, I don't remember every single video game stack. But yeah, like I thought that was really interesting as well. But to your point, about how sometimes like it can feel a little like scattershot, where like they start you up here and like, okay, now we're gonna cut to like a completely different like series of interviews and people, which while all containing interesting facts and like questions that they answered, sort of feels a little disconnected. So one of the ones I knew about Sierra Games, you guys like they made King's Quest, like Roberta and Steve-O, you're cutting out. Okay, good. Roberta and Ken Williams like basically started, and like Roberta is the one who wrote all the games essentially. Like she designed them out. Like it was like her made, and Ken is the one who just programmed out. She created the worlds, and I made them like happen on screen essentially. So like I kind of wanted to hear more about that. Like while what was there was cool, I was like, oh man, they're gonna like maybe focus this whole episode on Sierra and Roberta herself, and like it was only like maybe a quarter of the episode or so. Like I'm just saying, like while again like cool and interesting stuff presented, and with people who were there at the time, like on the cutting edge, I feel like they sometimes it's a little too broad, a little too surface level, but still that shit was interesting. I was excited to see like when they started out with her. I'm like, oh cool, it's Roberta Williams. Like maybe I'll see her whole story. So yeah, I thought that was pretty sweet. Any ones that you guys picked out that you liked?
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. I really would have liked to see more about Sierra because that's a really interesting story. Yeah, I guess I didn't mind the Sega episode or the This Is War. I think it was what it was called. I guess I didn't mind them like introducing EA as like as part of that. I thought they like maybe focused on it a little bit too much because I mean I guess the thing is like it was a big part of like Genesis's game plan
for them. Sure.
Yeah, but Sega's game plan for the Genesis. But yeah, it's that was an interesting episode, and I liked that they had like some of these episodes like focusing on the consoles and the companies themselves, and some of them focusing on like the types of games. So like you have the role playing the role playing game episode, you had the fighting episode, and you had the last episode, which kind of like just focused on like technology upgrades. Not only the 3D portion of that, but also the networked gaming, online gaming portion, which Doom was one of the first, if not the first game to do that. It was the first one to do it at like full speed game with like full speed gaming and like
real time essentially.
Yeah. So I had Doom. I never played it online because none of my friends like we couldn't figure out how to make that work. But like
in theory, it was.
I feel like that would have been I feel like that would have been pretty cool to do that back in the day. But yeah, it's just really interesting to see all these consoles and these companies and how they progressed and like the little things like I liked the guy who took over for Genesis is like basically got stalked by their their heads, corporate heads, until he was like, "Fine, I'll go and like take a meeting with you." Like on vacation with his family, they show up to the beach or whatever. Like,
we need a marketing guy. And he's like,
yeah, I've known. Sorry, I've known that story before. Like I've heard that story before, but it's still like every time, like it's so fucking hilarious. But yeah, I thought this was a good series. It was interesting because there were things that I like learned through watching it, and there were a lot of like familiar stories that maybe I learned a little bit more about, or you know, just it's interesting to hear them told again. So I think you're right though, Ian. It was a little bit. Some of the episodes were a little bit scattershot, not as focused as they could have been, but other than that, I thought it was pretty solid. A lot of interesting information, didn't take up too much time, and yeah, I enjoyed watching it.
any points that you liked or highlights or?
I like magic a lot. I don't perform magic, but I am fascinated by it. I'm a big fan of Penn Teller's Fool Us. And I particularly like finding out how tricks are done. I'm not interested in being whisked away to... I'm interested in how people are creative in crafting illusions. It does actually. That to me is like an engineering feat of magic.
Yep. And
listening to a lot of people discuss because in a lot of ways, graphics. This is particularly shown in the last episode where they're discussing flight mechanics, and we have to craft the camera to make it seem that that it's not too fast, it's not too slow. If we lock the camera, you don't feel like you're in control. How do we create the illusion that you're actually flying this machine in the graphical space? That to me is like so interesting, and to hear creative people discuss challenges to craft these illusions to make a game work, just right up my alley.
Yeah.
But on two broader, actually, well, I guess all three of my points are broad here. Is that
the series itself?
I am a teacher in computer science and involved with STEM, and it is that there's an underrepresentation in STEM. It tends to be a boys' club in a lot of ways, and I like the fact that they highlighted many different cultures. Not only did they do the technical side, but they showed the cultural importance of video games throughout the series, whether young people going off to competitions, what it meant for role-playing games for people in like LGBTQ communities who couldn't, who at that point there wasn't an outlet for them to express themselves. Like this... overall, I thought they did a great job, and also I think one of the guy who developed the cartridge. I never knew that story, and it's a great story. This nerdy guy who worked behind the scenes and was kind of tasked to create this, and it's like all these great little human interest pieces throughout.
Yeah.
And I did have a third point. The last interesting thing is, as I like human interest pieces, it's motivation for people throughout the years. So you have the nerdy fucks over at MIT who are like, how can I make as much money as possible? It's all about the money. Money, money, money. Here's what I'm doing. I can stand those guys. So the artists, the people like, I want to craft something lasting, or I want to give a space where you can be whoever you want to be. And like, or the people who are like, I'm just interested in the tech and how to solve problems that people come up with, like, and how to develop like 3D planes and like all them. It almost felt like every single person they interviewed had a different motivation for why they develop video games, and it was interesting to see those personalities come up.
Yes, I'm very glad you mentioned that because it was going to be my point. Like, yeah, they included a lot of like, it was very inclusive, if you will. Like, and yeah, the guy you're talking about his name was Jerry Larson, who at the time was a black man who happened to be an engineer who was tapped to create, like, he basically ad hoc cartridge technology, which then every, of course, video game industry, producer used ever since when till cartridges were replaced with disc and stuff. But yeah, it was his story, and he's like kind of an unsung like legend within the industry and stuff. So yeah, like, and like you mentioned, it was just very nicely inclusive, and maybe that's because it was so broad. Like at least they could cover all that stuff. Like for example, I was going to mention earlier, but they had the artist who did all the Final Fantasy stuff, and like he was just like hand drawing the art. Like he's like, here's how I work, and like yeah, like to see the creative process, a lot of the stuff was very interesting. And so maybe I'll segue to you, Steve-O, but so the last episode, I think we can agree, like, might be the most coherent and therefore, like, quote-unquote best one, or at least the one that I enjoyed the most. It was about, they interviewed Romero, of course, and famously, John Carmack, who was his partner, who made Doom with him, does not like to be interviewed, so he wasn't on it. But so they have Romero talking about like, no, we didn't give a fuck. Like we put out a press release for the game that hadn't been made yet. Like, we're still working on it. And shit.
I love that. That is
like, that's amazing. I'm like, yeah, it's so good.
Yeah.
Like,
I love
all those stories. Yeah.
Sorry, I was gonna say, yeah, I love that. Like when he was talking about that, and it's like, yeah, so I just put that out. So now we got to go and make this game like into what I promised everybody. Like, him putting in the press release, like you're going to be knee deep in the dead by like at whatever date is really great. And like them making that one of the difficulty levels of the game, and
exactly,
or one of the, I guess that was one of the original 3 releases. But yeah, like it was well done, and I agree with most of your points that you guys have said. I think that it is important that this shows the diversity of the video gaming world, because, like, honestly, it is sometimes it feels like the other people that do play and make video games are not shown or put up there, but everyone has always been there. It's not like video games are like a white guy thing. Everybody loves video games, and they appeal to a huge like audience.
From Congress people from Tennessee.
Yeah. Well, that's why everybody likes him, because Congress hates him, right?
Yeah, that's from Jack Thompson.
Yeah,
Cannon or whatever.
And friends. Yeah, exactly.
but yeah, it's good to see like. I think it's important to see how different people came together to make the solutions that made these video games work, and like that's kind of how any successful business plan should be. Like it takes, especially something creative like games, it takes like the best of from everywhere.
But what's fascinating though is how many people lied their way into their positions?
Yeah. Like video games were really like the Wild West. Very much fake it till you make it back then, right?
Exactly. Like, and like, I mean, like, that was the mindset. So that's how, like, yeah, right. A few of the interviews, like in various spots, were like, that's how I approach it. I basically kind of cheated to get the job, but I mean, it's what I wanted to do, and they gave it to me, and I was successful at it. So
yeah,
it worked out.
Was the guy that put that did the work for Nintendo? He put the answers to the test that he had to take inside of sunglasses.
I mean, again, like very neat little interesting stories from people who were there at the time, and like doing in all kinds of avenues and aspects of figuring out how to do games well, and like what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
And like as I always say, video games in their most positive like incarnation will bring everyone together.
I did like the mild anti or the corporate criticism that had in there, especially the guitars. Like when the artists have control, it's successful. When corporations are looking to crush and put out as many things, that's when it all falls apart, which is sort of true in reality. But there was that kind of purity of expression that it was kind of pushing forward in this. And cool, I like that.
Which is hilarious, because you look at the super, the companies that sell all the video games now, and they're all like super corporate.
It's very heavily ironic. I understand that. Yeah. But sure, like, I mean, saying like, like you guys said, it was very interesting and very cool just to check out like some stories from the creatives and so forth, who again were there, like literally making the games that we have evolved and enjoyed today. And hearing like their stories and stuff, and like that. All right, I'll leave on this one. I didn't know this either. Of course, I know Miyamoto. Everyone knows him. If you would think for the most part, But the story that was told about him is that he was apparently like, I don't know if he still is, a heavy smoker. There was only one section that they let him go smoking in Nintendo, so he'd be like,
That's where the two British programmers were.
Yeah, two foreigner guys who didn't they're basically outsourced contracts. So they stuck him in a room. Miyamoto would come there and smoke and just be like talking to bullshitting with them, and that's how they fucking made Star Fox.
Cigarettes are bringing the world together.
Yeah. I also love the story about how he came up with the gate idea for that, and
that's a really cool thing too.
Freaking fascinating. And it added in Inari Shrine.
Yep.
Little Ghost of Tsushima
Yep, exactly.
tie-in.
Yeah, it's all really well done, and I don't know, man. I think Steve, you're the one who caught this. Hey, we should check it out. I think it's from this year. It's very recent. It
just got released maybe a month ago.
Yeah. So if you've got a few hours to watch 6 episodes of some cool shit with some pretty fascinating people about the history and process of games, you should definitely check out High Score, because I think it does a really good job of highlighting all these things that we just said.
I will give the caveat that it is a love letter to the industry.
Certainly, yeah.
So
it has its bias,
it's very optimistic about the connectivity of video games, where things like hate culture and video games and things like that wouldn't even matter. It's all misunderstood, and there's a purity of expression there. And you know what?
That's fair. It's fair to throw in.
They don't shy away. They never try to pretend to be anything other than.
It is clearly a heart on the sleeve love letter to it.
And you know what? That's fine. It's optimistic about the future. It's optimistic about the past, and it shows what gaming could be. And you know what? Good for it.
Yeah, you're right. It is that, and so for that reason, I think it's a little more bit than enjoyable. So
yeah, I would say if you want to learn a little bit about the history of video games, check it out. If you want to learn about about video games in general, if you know nothing and want to learn get a good base, this is a good way to start too.
Yep, true.
Check it out.
If you're bigger nerds like us, you still might learn a thing or two, or you didn't know.
And as a person in the field, and Steve, perhaps you could also speak to this because you're in the field as well. It was technical enough that they had especially the last episode. It's this is actually. It's never too technical, but they do
bury you under it. But
they do talk enough about it that you're oh yeah, I kind of know what you.
It is fun to watch these super nerds that came up, that invented all this technology, get to just blab about it, and have them you can see their eyes light up when they're answering a question about how they invented this new technology at the time and stuff like that. So that's really cool.
Yeah, you're right. So it's a little bit uplifting and a little bit cool, especially again if you're in the game. So we recommend it without a review, but it is, and it's, you can actually probably just watch them out of order. If you're I don't only want to see the role-playing game episodes, or only want to see the fight game episode, you can totally do that.
There's a very loose connecting thread, kind of historical thread to it.
Yeah, but it's not necessary, so whatever. So I don't know. I think that'll do it. Those are my thoughts on High Score. Really well done, cool documentary. You guys got anything to say, or that you missed or forgot?
Yeah, I think that's going to do it.
All right, well, right on. So I've been here. I'm Scott Thurlow, here with Stephen Amosi.
Have a good one.
Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Documentary might not have a high score, but it's probably in the display.
Top 10.
It's got its name on the board. If not,
HS on the board.
Yep. So with that,
ASS.
Yeah, ASS.
Indeed, obviously. But yeah, with that, I think, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Peace.
Thank you for joining the Lost Signals Games and Gaming Culture. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows and more, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.